My mother-in-law smiled as she poured something clear into my glass and said it was a little welcome home drink for our favorite son-in-law. I saw her do it from the hallway outside the kitchen. Margaret Whitmore thought I was still trapped in the dining room, listening to her husband explain, again, why real men built companies instead of chasing sunsets with a camera. I had stepped away to find a pitcher of water for my wife, who was pregnant with a headache but not pregnant with a baby yet, though Margaret kept bringing that up too. The little bottle vanished into Margaret's pearl clutch so fast I almost questioned whether I had seen it at all. Then the ice in my glass shifted, and a thin oily shine floated across the bourbon like a secret trying not to breathe. "Caleb," she called, turning with that smooth country club smile of hers. "Don't be shy. I made this one. Myself." I had been married to Emily Whitmore for 5 years. For 5 years, her parents had treated me like a temporary mistake she was too sentimental to correct. I was a freelance photojournalist. I had shot wildfire evacuations in California, hurricane damage in Louisiana, border towns in Arizona, veterans' portraits in Ohio, and a series on opioid recovery that had been printed in a national magazine. My work had paid our rent, bought Emily's car, covered my own health insurance, and helped my younger sister finish nursing school. But to Richard Whitmore, retired investment titan and full-time judge of other people's worth, I was the camera boy. "How's the hobby, Caleb?" he asked every Thanksgiving. "Still waiting for National Geographic to discover you?" Sometimes Emily squeezed my knee under the table. Not because she was embarrassed by me. Because she was embarrassed by them. That night was Margaret's 62nd birthday at their summer house in the Hamptons, Asadar-shingled mansion with ocean views, imported stone floors, and enough silence between family members to drown in. I had just come back from 3 weeks in Montana photographing ranchers fighting a corporate land grab. I was exhausted, sunburned, and carrying memory cards worth more than the watch Richard kept flashing at dinner. I did not want to go. Emily stood in our bathroom doorway in Brooklyn while I unpacked sand from my boots. "Just 2 hours," she said. "Please. It's my mom's birthday." Her eyes were tired in a way I had started to hate. Every invitation from her parents made her smaller before she even put on makeup. So I went. I brought white peonies because Margaret liked expensive flowers pretending to be simple. I brought a bottle of wine I couldn't really afford because Richard always checked labels. I wore the navy jacket Emily said made me look like somebody who belonged anywhere. I should have trusted the weight in my stomach when we pulled through the iron gate. The dinner was exactly what I expected. Richard sat at the head of the table like he had personally invented gravity. Margaret floated around pouring wine and compliments that had teeth hidden inside them. Emily's older brother, Nathan, barely looked up from his phone. His wife, Lauren, watched everything with the careful stillness of a woman who had learned survival by smiling late and speaking rarely. Halfway through dinner, Richard asked me what I was charging for little portraits now. Before I could answer, Margaret laughed and said, "Oh, Richard, don't embarrass him. Creative people don't like numbers." Emily's fork hit her plate. "Mom." "What?" "I'm teasing." "No, you're not." The room cooled. Richard leaned back. "Emily, your mother is only making conversation. She makes the same conversation every time we come here." I put my hand over Emily's under the table. I wanted to leave. But leaving would become another family legend about my insecurity, my temper, my inability to handle good-natured humor. So I smiled. "Actually," I said, "the Montana series was picked up by The Atlantic. It comes out next month." Richard raised his eyebrows. "The magazine?" "No, the ocean," I said before I could stop myself. Lauren coughed into her napkin. Emily's mouth twitched. Richard did not laugh. Margaret's smile stayed, but something behind it narrowed. After dessert, she announced cocktails. She asked me what I wanted in a tone that sounded almost kind. "Bourbon, neat," I said. "Perfect. Richard, you too." Richard grunted without looking up. I followed a minute later because Emily asked for water and because, after 5 years, I had learned never to leave Margaret alone with my food or my reputation if I could help it. From the hallway, I saw her take 2 glasses from the bar shelf. She poured bourbon into both. Then she opened her clutch, removed a tiny amber bottle, and tipped a clear liquid into one glass, mine. She stirred it with a silver cocktail pick, tapped it once against the rim, and placed a large cube of ice inside. The glass shimmered. My body went quiet. I had photographed coyotes outside Tucson at dawn. I had learned that predators are not always loud. Sometimes they are patient. Sometimes they wear silk. I stepped into the kitchen. "I can carry those." Margaret flinched, just slightly. "No, sweetheart, I've got it." "Sweetheart." That was new. "I insist," I said. "Birthday girl shouldn't be serving everybody." Her hand tightened around the poisoned glass. "This one is yours." "Great." It took both glasses before she could stop me. Her eyes jumped to the left glass. Too late. In the dining room, Richard was scrolling through his phone. Emily was talking quietly to Lauren. Nathan had disappeared onto the deck to take a work call. I placed the shimmering glass in front of Richard. Here you go, sir. He did not even look at it. At least. You can serve drinks better than you can plan a future. Margaret froze in the doorway. He held the clean glass. To family, I said. Richard drank. Margaret's face changed so quickly that, for 1 second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. For the next 45 minutes, I watched her watch him. She laughed too loud. She interrupted him before he could take more than 2 sips. She tried to switch glasses once, but Richard snapped at her because he hated being managed in his own house. Then his face lost color. He pressed a hand to his stomach. Margaret, he muttered. She stood. What is it? He shoved his chair back. The sound scraped across the floor like a warning. He staggered toward the powder room near the foyer, sweating through his white shirt. The noises that followed were so violent the hired pianist in the living room stopped mid-song. Emily jumped up. Dad? Nathan came. Back inside. What happened? Maybe the seafood, Margaret said too fast. The lobster must have been bad. We all ate the lobster, Lauren said. Margaret looked at her like she had spoken out of turn. Emily ran to the bathroom door, knocking and calling for her father. Nathan demanded someone call the concierge doctor. Richard groaned behind the locked door. I did not yell. I did not accuse her. I did not stand on a chair and declare myself the hero of the night. I picked up my untouched glass, wrapped it in a linen napkin, and slid it into a zippered evidence bag I kept in my camera backpack for wet lenses and field samples. Then I sat down again while the Whitmore family performed panic like people who were more afraid of scandal than illness. Lauren saw me. Her eyes moved from my bag to Margaret. And I knew she knew something. By the time the doctor arrived, Richard was conscious but humiliated. His blood pressure was strange. His memory was foggy. He kept asking why everyone was staring at him. Margaret never left his side, but she also never stopped watching me. Emily cried in the hallway, shaking because her father, cruel as he was still her father. She leaned into me when I wrapped my arm around her, and that made Margaret's face twist for half a second before she smoothed it away. That was the part that hurt most. Not the glass. Not the insult. Not even the realization that my mother-in-law had tried to drug me in a house filled with witnesses. It was watching the woman I loved weep for a father who had just swallowed the punishment meant for me while her mother adjusted her pearls and prepared the next lie. We left after midnight. In the car, Emily stared out at the black ocean beyond the dunes. Something was weird tonight, she whispered. I kept both hands on the wheel. Yes. She looked at me. You know something. I wanted to tell her. Right then. I wanted to pull over, show her the glass, explain what I had seen, let the truth crash through her life before Margaret could polish it into a misunderstanding. But I knew the Whitmores. If I accused Margaret without proof, Richard would call me unstable. Margaret would cry. Nathan would retreat. Emily would be split open between husband and parents while they stood over the wound offering bandages soaked in poison. So I said, I'm going to find out. Emily turned away again. The next morning, Margaret texted her. Your father is fine. Food poisoning. Caleb seemed tense last night, maybe he should rest more after these trips. I read it over Emily's shoulder. There it was, the first stone. Not an accusation. A seed. By Sunday, Richard had sent a message. Into the family group chat. Doctor says bad shellfish. Let's not dramatize. Then a separate text to me. Hope you learned something about overindulging at family events. Emily deserves stability. I stared at the phone until my reflection went dark on the screen. I typed nothing. On Monday, I drove to a private lab in Queens owned by an old client named Dr. Patel, a forensic toxicologist who had once hired me to photograph evidence for a wrongful death case. I handed him the sealed glass and told him I needed to know whether anything had been added to the drink. He looked at me over his glasses. Do I want to know why? No, is someone in danger? I thought of Emily, of Lauren, of every dinner table where Margaret had smiled too sweetly. Maybe. He nodded once. Then I'll rush it. While I waited, the Whitmores started moving. Margaret called Emily every morning. She asked if I was sleeping. She asked if I had been drinking more since Montana. She asked whether my field work was affecting my nerves. She offered to pay for a therapist, then laughed like it was a joke. Richard invited me to lunch at his club. I went because I needed to see the shape of the trap. The club sat in Manhattan behind dark wood doors and old moneymeners. Richard ordered for both of us without asking. He drank sparkling water. I did too. Caleb, he said, I'll be direct. Emily has ambition. You have talent, maybe, but talent is not a foundation. I didn't realize this was a construction meeting. His mouth tightened. She needs a family plan. Children. A home. A husband who isn't chasing tragedy for a paycheck. My work pays. Sometimes. That's the problem. I sat back. He studied me like an acquisition he had decided against. Do you know about Daniel Pierce? The name meant nothing. No, he smiled a little. Before you, Emily was engaged to a surgeon. Good family. Good future. She ended it because she found out he cheated. Broke her heart. But she recovered. She always recovers when guided properly. Something in the phrase guided properly made my skin crawl. Why are you telling me this? To remind you that Emily has walked away from men who disappointed her before. I leaned forward. Are you threatening me? No. I'm educating you. When I got home, I found Emily sitting on the couch with her knees drawn up, phone in her hand. My mom wants me to stay with them for a few days, she said. Why? She says we both seem stressed. Do you want to go? Emily say yes filled, and that answer hurt more than anger would have. I don't know. That night, after she fell asleep, Dr. Patel called. Caleb, he said, and his voice had lost its easy warmth. There was a sedative in that glass. Prescription level. Not enough to kill a healthy adult, but enough to impair judgment, memory, coordination. It could make someone seem drunk, confused, unstable. Depending on weight and tolerance, it could cause vomiting, blackouts, panic. I closed my eyes. Can you put that in writing? I already did. I sat in our kitchen until 4 a.m., reading the report again and again under the light above the stove. Margaret had not tried to murder me. She had tried to erase my dignity. The next day was supposed to be the opening of my small gallery show in Chelsea, the biggest professional night of my life. If I had stumbled, slurred, vomited, passed out, or missed it because of food poisoning, they would have had their story. Caleb was unstable. Caleb embarrassed Emily. Caleb drinks too much. Caleb cannot handle pressure. And Emily, trained since childhood to believe her parents could see dangers she could not, might have believed them. I wanted to wake her up and show her everything. But the report was still only one piece. Margaret would say the lab was wrong. Richard would say I tampered with the glass. Nathan would say nobody wanted drama. Emily would look at me with broken eyes and ask why I had turned her family into a crime scene. So I waited. And I started doing what my job had trained me to do. I observed. I documented. I followed patterns. For 2 weeks, I moved quietly. I searched public records. I checked prescription databases I could legally access through Dr. Patel's referral contacts. I spoke to former household staff without saying too much. Money opens doors, but resentment keeps them unlocked. A former housekeeper named Marisol met me outside a laundromat in Jackson Heights. She kept twisting her wedding ring while she talked. Mrs. Whitmore liked people calm, she said. What does that mean? It means if someone cried too much, drank too much, argued too much, she had something for that. She always said doctors gave it to her. Mr. Whitmore said not to make a fuss. Did she ever give it to guests? Marisol looked at me for a long time. I signed a non-disclosure agreement. I'm not asking for a statement. I'm asking if my wife is safe. Her face changed. She loves her children, Marisol said. But she loves control more. That was answer enough. Then, on a Friday, a package arrived at my studio with no return address. Inside was a flash drive and a folded note. About time somebody saw them clearly. L. Lauren. The drive contained security footage from the Hamptons house. Not the polished feed they showed guests on a tablet by the door. The raw backup from the service hallway camera and kitchen camera, the kind rich people forgot existed because they never had to clean their own corners. The first video showed Marguerite in the kitchen, opening her clutch, adding liquid to my glass. The second video, recorded after Emily and I left, showed Richard sitting pale and furious in the library while Margaret paced. It was not meant for me, Richard hissed. You took the wrong glass. You let me take the wrong glass. I tried to stop him. You tried to embarrass him at your birthday dinner, Margaret. Not poison your husband in front of 18 people. I was protecting Emily. You were making a mess. Then came a line that made the room around me disappear. This is not the first time you've done something stupid with pills, Richard said. Margaret slapped him. The audio cut out there, but I did not need the rest. It was not a mistake. It was a method. I called Lauren. She answered after one ring. Why did you send this? Because they did it to me too, she said. With drugs. No. With rumors. Emails, little lies. Big lies. They made Nathan believe I was after his trust fund. They told his friends my parents had liens on their house. They made me look cheap, desperate, unstable. I spent 2 years apologizing for existing. Does Nathan know? He knows enough to feel guilty and not enough to act. Why now? There was a pause. Because Emily was kind home when nobody else in that family was. And because I saw your face when you took that glass. You knew. I knew. Margaret knew. That house has been waiting for someone to stop pretending. I sat on the floor of my studio with the flash drive in my hand. Lauren, did they do something to Daniel Pierce? She went silent. How do you know that name? Richard mentioned him. Then you need to talk to Daniel. Finding him was easy. Getting him to answer me took 3 emails, 2 messages, and a subject line that said, I married Emily Whitmore. I think her parents lied to both of you. He called me from Boston the next morning. His voice was careful. Is Emily okay? The tenderness in that question told me the wound had never closed completely. She's okay. But I need to know what happened. He exhaled. What did they tell her? That you cheated. A bitter laugh came through the phone. Of course. You didn't? No. I loved her. I was 29, stupidly proud, working 80 hours a week, but I didn't cheat. 3 weeks before our wedding, she received screenshots from some woman I had supposedly been seeing. Hotel receipts. Messages. Photos of me entering a building with her. Were they real? The building was a hospital conference center. The woman was a pharmaceutical rep in a meeting with 12 people. The messages were fake. The hotel receipt was for a room I never booked. By the time I proved it, Emily had blocked me. Richard threatened to destroy my residency if I came near her. Margaret told my mother Emily had found someone cleaner. My throat tightened. Do you still have proof? I kept everything because I knew someday they'd do it again. By that night, Daniel had sent me emails, metadata reports, bank records, and a scan of a letter from Richard Saturny warning him against emotional harassment of Emily. I did not sleep. The story was bigger than my glass. The Whitmores had not simply disliked me. They had designed Emily's life like a portfolio, cutting losses, removing risks, hiding damage, and calling it love. The hardest part was not collecting proof. It was sitting across from Emily every morning while she drank coffee in one of my old shirts and not telling her until I had enough truth to survive her grief. Because grief can turn on the messenger. On the 16th day after Margaret's birthday, I invited Nathan and Lauren to our apartment for dinner. I told Emily I wanted a quiet family night away from her parents. She looked suspicious but relieved. Lauren arrived carrying a pie she had not baked. Nathan came in stiff, defensive, already wearing the face of a man who expected to be attacked. After dinner, Emily reached for my hand. Caleb, what is going on? I looked at her. Really looked. At the woman who had chosen me in a courthouse ceremony her mother called efficient. At the woman who hung my rejected photos in our hallway because she said Holmes needed proof that someone noticed the world. At the woman who still flinched when her phone lit up with her mother's name. I need you to see something, I said. And before you decide I'm cruel or paranoid or trying to turn you against your family, I need you to see all of it. I connected my laptop to the TV. For the next 74 minutes, I played everything. The kitchen footage. The lab report. Richard and Margaret arguing in the library. Marisol's audio, with her permission, saying Margaret liked people calm. Daniel's emails. The fake messages. The attorney letter. Lauren's testimony. Emily did not cry at first. Her face simply emptied. Nathan stood up during the library video. That's not real. Lauren looked at him. Nathan. It's not real. It is. He turned on her. You knew? I lived it. His anger collapsed before it found a target. Emily finally spoke when Daniel's letter appeared on the screen. They made me think he cheated. Her voice sounded like it came from another room. I paused the video. Yes. She covered her mouth. I hated him. I know. I hated myself for loving him after. I know. Her eyes moved to me. And they tried to do this to you. Yes. She shook her head, slow, like her mind was refusing to arrange the facts into a shape that could exist. My mother put something in your drink. Yes. And my father knew enough to cover it. Yes. Nathan sat down hard. Lauren was crying silently. Emily looked at me, and the pain in her face almost broke me. Why didn't you tell me that night? Because they would have made it my word against theirs. I needed you to see them, not just hear me describe them. She stood, walked to the window, and stared down at the Brooklyn street below. For a long time, nobody moved. Then her phone rang. Mom. Emily looked at the screen until it stopped. It rang again. She answered and put it on speaker. Hi, sweetheart, Margaret said, sweet as warm syrup. Your father and I were thinking you should come out this weekend. Just you. You sound so strained lately, and sometimes distance helps a woman think clearly. Emily closed her eyes. Mom, I saw the videos. Silence. What videos? The kitchen. The glass. You and Dad in the library, Daniel. Lauren. A small breath came through the speaker. Caleb is manipulating you. Emily opened her eyes, and something in them had changed. No, she said. For the first time, I didn't think he is. Margaret's voice sharpened under the sugar. Emily, listen to me carefully. That man has always resented this family. He wants to isolate you. You put a sedative in his drink. I was trying to protect you from embarrassment. The room went still. Even through the phone, Margaret realized she had said too much. Emily's hand shook. But her voice did not. Tomorrow night. Your house. All of us. No lies. Emily, all of us, she repeated, and hung up. Nobody spoke. Then Nathan whispered, what happens tomorrow? I looked at my camera bag by the door. Emily turned to me. Tell the truth the way you know how. Tomorrow night, I was not going to take pictures. I was going to focus the room until nobody could look away. We arrived at the Hamptons house at 7:03 p.m. with my camera, a tripod, 3 copies of the lab report, printed emails, the flash drive, and a lawyer waiting on standby by text. Richard opened the door wearing a cashmere sweater and the expression of a man who had survived worse markets than this. Well, he said, this looks dramatic. Margaret stood behind him in a cream dress, diamond earrings, and a gold cross resting against her collarbone like a prop in a courtroom. Emily, darling, she said, reaching out. Come inside. You and I should talk privately. Emily did not move toward her. No private talks. Margaret's hand lowered. Nathan and Lauren arrived 2 minutes later. Lauren walked in with her chin up. Nathan looked like he might throw up. We gathered in the great room where floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the ocean as a black sheet behind us. The same room where Margaret hosted charity boards, campaign donors, hospital trustees, and every person she wanted to believe the Whitmores were generous, gracious, untouchable. I set up the tripod. Richard laughed. Are we being interviewed? Yes, I said. Margaret's eyes hardened. This is a family matter, not one of your little assignments. Exactly, I said. Family deserves a record. Richard poured himself water from a crystal decanter. Nobody else accepted a drink. That small refusal cut deeper than shouting would have. Emily stood beside me. Mom, she said. Tell me the truth. Margaret looked at her daughter with wet eyes already prepared. The truth is that I have spent my life protecting you. Did you put a sedative in Caleb's drink? Margaret looked at Richard that he gave her nothing. I put a calming agent in it, she said. Lauren made a sound like Oleg breaking into a sob. A calming agent? Nathan repeated. Margaret lifted her chin. He was tense. He had been hostile all evening. I thought if he relaxed, perhaps we could avoid a scene. Emily stared at her. He didn't drink it. Dad did. Richard's jaw flexed. Margaret's face reddened. That was an accident. You mean drugging my husband was intentional, but drugging Dad was an accident? The words hung there, clean and terrible. Richard stepped in. Your mother made a foolish decision. She has apologized. Privately to me. Not to Caleb, Emily said. Richard looked at me like apologizing to me would lower his tax bracket. Margaret turned suddenly. Fine. Caleb, I am sorry you misunderstood my intentions. I almost smiled. That wasn't an apology. That was a press release. Nathan's head snapped toward me, but Emily put a hand up. No. He's right. Margaret's tears came faster. Emily, you don't understand what marriage does to a woman when she chooses beneath herself. You start shrinking your life to make a man feel tall. I watched you defend late rent, unstable work, dangerous travel. Our rent has never been late, Emily said. That is not the point. It is when you lie. Margaret's mouth opened, then closed. I placed the lab report on the coffee table. According to this, the sedative could have caused impaired memory, loss of coordination, confusion, vomiting, panic, and blackouts. My gallery opening was the next night. Richard looked at the report but did not touch it. You expect us to believe you didn't tamper with this? I expected you to say that. I played the kitchen footage on the TV. The room watched Margaret poison my glass in high definition. For 18 seconds, nobody breathed. Then Margaret said, that video has been edited. I played the library footage. Richard's voice filled the room. It was not meant for me. Margaret's face went white. Nathan whispered, Dad. Richard stared at the screen as if his own image had betrayed him personally. That was a private conversation, he said. Lauren stepped forward. So was every lie you told about me? Margaret turned on her. Oh, Lauren, please. You have always enjoyed being the wounded outsider. Lauren's voice trembled, but she did not back down. You told Nathan my family was broke. You told his friends I was trying to get pregnant to secure money. You sent anonymous messages to my employer saying I had lied on my resume. Nathan looked at his wife. What? Lauren nodded, tears sliding down her face. I was too ashamed to tell you. And when it read, you said your parents were just protective. Nathan turned toward Richard. Did you know that? Richard's silence answered before his mouth did. Margaret wiped her cheek. We had concerns. You had power, Lauren said. And you used it because I didn't come from people you could brag about. Nathan took one step back from his parents. I clicked to the next file. Daniel's emails. Emily made a quiet broken sound. Margaret stiffened. Do not bring that up. Emily's voice was barely above a whisper. You destroyed my engagement. Richard's eyes flashed. He was wrong for you. He didn't cheat. He was ambitious in the wrong way. What does that even mean? It means he was never going to fit. Emily laughed once, sharp and devastated. So you manufactured a betrayal? Margaret grabbed the back of a chair. We saved you from a mistake. You broke me. No. You were young. You recovered. I didn't recover. I learned not to trust myself. That was when Margaret's expression cracked for real. Not guilt. Not yet. Surprise. She had expected anger. She had not expected accuracy. Emily stepped away from me and faced both of them alone. You made me believe love was dangerous unless you approved it. You made me think my instincts were defective. You made me suspicious of kindness, ashamed of desire, afraid of choosing anyone you didn't pick. Richard's voice lowered. Emily, enough. No, she said. You do not get to enough me. The whole room changed. For 34 years, Emily had been there. Polished daughter, their charitable board smile, their proof that the Whitmore name produced grace. That night, she became a woman with her own spine. She pointed to the TV. You did this to Daniel. You did this to Lauren. You tried to do it to Caleb. And I want to know how many other people disappeared from our lives because they became inconvenient to you. Margaret cried harder. You are my child. I am not your property. Richard put down his glass. Be careful. That was the wrong thing to say. I opened the folder and slid a second stack of papers across the table. I was hoping you'd say that. Richard looked at the papers. His face changed. For the first time since I had met him, he looked unsure. What is this? A summary of everything on the flash drive. Videos. Lab results. Daniel's records. Lauren's documentation. Marisol's statement. A timeline. Also a note from my attorney explaining which agencies and institutions might be interested if a member of a hospital board has been misusing controlled medication. Margaret sat down slowly. Richard's voice became quiet. You would destroy this family? No, I said. You built a family that could be destroyed by the truth. That's not my design flaw. Nathan covered his face. Lauren put a hand on his shoulder. Emily stood beside me again, not hiding behind me, just standing with me. Richard picked up the flash drive like it was a live match. What do you want? That question told me everything. He did not ask what was right. He asked the price. I want boundaries, Emily said before I could answer. Real ones. Margaret looked at her. What does that mean? It means you do not call me 5 times a day. Unless you can do it with respect. You do not bring up Daniel. You do not contact my friends, my clients, my doctors, my future children, or anyone connected to my life without my permission. Future children, Margaret whispered. Emily's face tightened. Someday. And when that day comes, they will not be raised inside your control. Richard looked at me. And you? What do you want? I thought about every dinner where I had swallowed humiliation so Emily would not have to choose. I thought about the glass. I thought about my father, who had died when he was 17, teaching me that dignity was not volume. I thought about how easy revenge looked from the outside and how dirty it felt when you stood close enough to use it. I want you to understand something, I said. I'm not posting this. I'm not sending it to your club tonight. I'm not putting Margaret in handcuffs in front of Emily unless you force my hand. Margaret sobbed once. Do not mistake that for weakness, I continued. If you lie about me, if you try to separate us, if you threaten Lauren, if you punish Nathan, if you touch our lives with another invisible hand, this goes everywhere it needs to go. Richard's eyes narrowed. Blackmail. No. A locked door. You decide whether to kick it open. Hestered at me for a long time. Then he said the words I never expected. I underestimated you. Yes, I said. That was expensive. Nobody hugged that night. Nobody healed. But something ended. Emily walked out of that house without asking permission. Nathan walked out holding Lauren's hand. I carried the camera, the folder, and a copy of The Truth. At the front door, Margaret caught Emily's sleeve. Are you leaving me? Emily looked at her mother's hand, then gently removed it. I'm leaving the version of myself that stayed. For 6 months, we did not go back. Emily started therapy on Tuesdays. Nathan started therapy 3 weeks later and called Emily after every session like a man reporting from a foreign country. Lauren stopped apologizing before every opinion. Daniel Pierce sent Emily one email that said he was glad she finally knew the truth, that he was married now, that he hoped she would be free. Emily cried over it for one night, then slept peacefully in my arms for the first time in weeks. Margaret sent short messages. Thinking of you. Hope you are well. Saw rain in Brooklyn. Drive carefully. Emily answered when she wanted and ignored them when she needed to. Richard did not text me at all. Then, in December, a cream envelope arrived. A dinner invitation. A new beginning, Margaret had written in her perfect slanted script. Emily held the card for a long time. I want to go, she said. I did not like it, but I understood. Then we go with rules. She nodded. We didn't sleep there. We don't accept drinks we didn't pour. We leave whenever we want. And if they start, we end it. And the flash drive? She looked at the locked drawer in my desk, it stays home. But they know it exists. The dinner was quieter than any Whitmore dinner I had ever attended. No hired pianist. No guests. No charity chairwoman telling stories about Tuscany. Just Richard, Margaret, Nathan, Lauren, Emily, and me at a table that seemed too large for people learning how not to perform. Margaret served roast chicken and asked Lauren about her work without sounding like she was measuring her salary. Richard asked Nathan about a project and did not correct him. Emily poured her own wine. I drank water from a sealed bottle I opened myself. Progress, I had learned, sometimes looked insulting to outsiders. After dessert, Richard asked me to step into his study. Emily's hand brushed mine under the table. I nodded. The study smelled like leather, smoke, and old decisions. The walls were lined with books I doubted Richard had read and photos of handshakes with senators he wanted people to remember. He closed the door but left it cracked. That was new. I have a proposal, he said. I'm listening. There's a communications role opening at the firm. High-level image strategy. Investor materials, executive profiles. It pays well. Benefits. Stability. I almost laughed. You want me to work for you? I want to offer an olive branch. No, I said. You want to put a leash on something you failed to break. His jaw tightened. You are proud. My work is serious. It did not say it wasn't. You said it for 5 years. He looked away. A small silence passed between us. Then he said, every man has a price. There it is, I said. What? The thing you believe instead of love. He turned back. I stepped closer. You think everything can be bought because you never learned what anything is worth. Emily is not a merger. Nathan is not an asset. Lauren is not a liability. I'm not a risk category. And the family you claim to protect has been paying interest on your fear for decades. His face darkened. Careful, Caleb. You tried careful. It got us here. For a second, I thought he might explode. Instead, he looked tired. Old, suddenly. What do you want from me? Nothing. I have to become yours to receive. I left the study. Emily saw my face and stood immediately. We're going, she said. Margaret's hand flew to her throat. Already? Emily looked at me, then at them. Actually, before we leave, we should tell you something. The table went still. Emily took my hand. I'm pregnant. Margaret gasped. Lauren covered her mouth and smiled through tears. Nathan whispered, oh my God. Richard did not move at all. How far? Margaret asked. 3 months. Her tears came then. I think they were real, that made them more complicated, not less. Richard looked from Emily to me as if the ground under the family name had shifted. I leaned close enough that only he could hear. My child will not be a pawn in your games. I promise you that. For once, Richard had no clever answer. He simply nodded. 3 weeks later, a notarized letter arrived from Richard's attorney. Inside was a deed transfer for the small brownstone Emily and I had been renting in Brooklyn. The property had been purchased quietly through a trust and transferred to Emily's name with no repayment clause, no control provision, no family board approval, no hidden hook I could find after paying my own lawyer to tear it apart. There was also a separate education trust for the baby. No note. No apology. Men like Richard rarely know how to say I was wrong without converting it into paperwork. Emily cried when she read it, but not because she was bought. Because for the first time, her father had given something without instructions. We don't have to accept it, I said. She touched the letter. I know. Do you want to? She looked around our apartment, at the cracked window frame, the wall of my prince, the tiny room we had already started calling the nursery. I want to accept it as surrender, she said. Not as ownership. So we did. Our daughter was born in July at 6:12 in the morning after 19 hours of labor that made every dramatic thing I had ever photographed look polite. Emily crushed my hand, cursed me twice, cried once, then laughed when the baby screamed like she had arrived furious at the lighting. We named her Rose. Margaret and Richard came to the hospital on the second day. They brought flowers, too many, and a stuffed rabbit with a satin bow. Margaret washed her hands without being asked. Richard stood near the wall, looking terrified of a 7-pound baby. May I hold her? Margaret asked Emily. Not assumed. Asked. Emily looked at me. I looked at her. She nodded. Margaret held Rose like she was holding forgiveness she knew she had not earned. Tears slipped down her face and fell onto the hospital blanket. She's beautiful, she whispered. She is, Emily said. Richard touched Rose's tiny foot with one finger. She has Caleb's eyes, he said. The room went quiet. It was the first time Richard had said my name without using it as a correction. I did not forgive him that day. Forgiveness is not a doorbell someone rings because a Bobby is cute. But I allowed the moment to exist without poisoning it with history. That was harder than anger. Months passed. Margaret learned to ask before visiting. Richard learned to text instead of command. Sometimes they failed. Sometimes Emily ended calls early, sometimes old habits slipped into the room and we escorted them out without ceremony. Nathan and Lauren got stronger. They moved into a house 40 minutes away from Richard's office instead of 4 minutes. Lauren got promoted. Nathan finally told his father no about joining the firm's board and survived the silence that followed. As for me, the Montana series did better than I expected. Then the wildfire portrait sold. Then a gallery owner in Chelsea offered me a real solo show, not a charity corner, not a favor, not a pity wall. Opening night, Emily stood beside me in a black dress with Rose asleep against her chest. The gallery smelled like wine, raincoats, and fresh paint. My photographs covered the walls, ranchers with dust in the lines of their faces, nurses outside a rural clinic, a little boy watching floodwater crawl up his porch steps, a wild horse standing under a bruised sky. People came. Not because Richard invited them, because the work mattered. Near the end of the night, Richard appeared. Alone. No Margaret.no entourage. No polished introduction. He walked slowly through the room, stopping before a photograph of a lone wolf in Yellowstone, half hidden in snow and shadow, staring straight through the lens. He stood there for a long time. I approached but did not speak. Finally, he said, you waited for this shot. 3 days. In the cold? Mostly. He nodded. I would have left after 3 hours. I know. He looked at me, and for once there was no insult waiting behind his eyes. You have a good eye. I let the sentence settle between us. Then I said, I know. His mouth moved like he almost smiled. He did not. But he extended his hand. I shook it. It was not love. It was not apology. It was respect arriving late and out of breath. Across the room, Margaret held Rose while Emily watched carefully. Margaret did not kiss the baby without asking. She did not say the child looked like a Whitmore. She did not tell Emily how to hold a bottle or when to change pediatricians. She simply stood there, swaying gently, whispering something. I could not hear. Later, when the gallery emptied and we stepped onto the wet sidewalk, Emily looked up at the city lights. Do you think they changed? She asked. I adjusted Rose's blanket. I don't know. Emily leaned her head against my shoulder. But they learned they can't change us. She smiled, tired and beautiful. Maybe that's enough. Maybe it was. I did not win by screaming. I did not win by humiliating them in public, though God knows I could have. I did not win by making Emily choose between the family that raised her and the family she was building. I won by staying steady when they needed me to look unstable. I won by gathering truth instead of throwing accusations. I won by protecting my wife without stealing her choice. And Emily won too. She won more than anyone. She walked out of the cage they had wallpapered to look like love. She learned that honoring her parents did not mean obeying their fear. She learned that a boundary is not cruelty, sometimes it is the only shape love can survive in. Margaret once put something in my drink to prove I was not worthy of her daughter. In the end, she proved something else. She proved that a camera was never just my hobby. A camera had taught me patience. It had taught me to watch the edges of a scene, to notice what powerful people hoped stayed out of frame, to wait until the lie moved into the light. They thought I was the poor photographer's son-in-law. They forgot photographers know how to expose things. And the night Margaret tried to blur me into shame, she gave me the sharpest picture I ever took, the truth, finally in focus.